when it comes to actually budgeting for a mortgage, I want to make sure that they understand. So sometimes they'll budget more than their rent is. And can they really afford that? Because when we look at their application, we're looking at what shows up on the credit report, what their income is. If they have student loans or child support or something like that, that will be on the application. But if they pay daycare, if they have bowling league fees, if they tithe to their church, I don't know what those expenses are. And I want to make sure that they are including those.
So, Candy and I have recorded one of these already, but this is Dave Steinberg. Welcome to the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. And we're talking today about first-time homebuyers. First-time homebuyers are uh, are people that we love to serve, both Candy and I. She's in Texas. I'm in New York. Don't tell your Texas friends that you talk.
Okay, it'll be our secret.
Yeah. Um, and you know, I love getting that call from the first time home buyer. Who tell me about a recent first time home buyer and what their experience was and how what you brought to the conversation.
Sure. Yeah. I'm working with somebody right now, as a matter of fact. And our first conversation is always usually they're recommended, they're referred to me. And I always ask them, have you ever bought a home before? And if they say no, I want to make sure that they understand what to expect next. So we'll talk about the process of going under or getting pre-qualified, first of all, what to expect during the pre-qualification process, what to expect when they go under contract, and then what to expect after the fact. So, that conversation could last a while because there's a lot of information that I want to make sure that they have. And then I want them to be able to answer any questions that they have about the process. And then also to understand that I'm going to be available to them to answer any questions in the future. I don't expect them to remember everything. And I do expect them to think of other questions in the middle of the night while they're considering what they're doing.
Hmm. So, you know, it's so interesting that we're half a continent away from each other, but nevertheless, our experiences are so similar. I love dealing with first-time homebuyers. And
Mm-hmm.
um, what I try to do is bring my experience to the table because the scenarios seem to repeat themselves, right? The questions that people have. There, so we start with really very easy, and just talk about what they will qualify for with a mortgage. But I talk about the whole process, and
Right.
and I'm old fashioned. I have the technology. I can take online applications, but whenever I'm given the choice, I always like to sit across the table virtually or really and say, "Hey, Candy, let's do your application in person." And the reason I like doing that is because when I listen to what you have to say, I learn about things that I would miss if I was just reading a prepared application. And then
Absolutely.
and then so often what happens is we might go off on a different tangent. Somebody who might be planning to put down, let's say, 20%. I know your market is often less, but they may have student loans or they may have credit card debt. And we'll have a conversation about the pros and cons of taking a 20% down mortgage and leaving the student loans present, or maybe taking a 10% loan and getting rid of as much debt as possible, or a 5% loan.
Right.
And then strategically, sometimes what we'll do is we'll pre-approve them for a higher down payment, but swivel to the lower down payment once they're approved. So they've met the requirements of the contract, but now we structure the loan in the way that's best for them. I love doing that because it's that's where you can add value. Sometimes it's understanding how long they plan to be in the home or whatever.
Right.
Um, yeah. So tell me a little bit more about this couple that you're helping now, the first-time home buyer?
Yeah, so I do mine a little differently. I do prefer an online application. So usually we'll have that first conversation. And so many people, especially younger people nowadays, don't really like phone calls necessarily. So they do like to, text message, and they like the technology. So usually we'll have a conversation about what to expect, what they're looking for in a home. And that conversation will be maybe 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how much time they have. And then we'll send them the application link. And once I get the application link and the credit report back, then we have that longer conversation. And I ask them about what it is that they're looking for. It's a little bit about the house. Obviously, that's not my side, that's the realtor side, but I want to know what it is that they're planning for, what they need the extra room for. Are they planning a family? Do they have pets? They want a backyard for their dog to run around, so that we kind of get an idea of what their motivation is for buying the home, to make sure that we're fitting that in. One of the important things that I see a lot is that they'll give us a number that they want to be at. This is the monthly payment that they want their house payment to be. But when we qualify them, we're looking at what's the most we can qualify them for. And I always tell people, you need to budget this in. And I love to talk to people 3, 6 months before they even are ready to move
Mhm.
forward, so that we can talk about their budget. So I want you to write down a budget, because they've never bought a house before. They've never paid a mortgage. They may be paying rent, and maybe their utilities are built into that or something. But when it comes to actually budgeting for a mortgage, I want to make sure that they understand. So sometimes they'll budget more than their rent is. And can they really afford that? Because when we look at their application, we're looking at what shows up on the credit report, what their income is. If they have student loans or child support or something like that, that will be on the application. But if they pay daycare, if they have bowling league fees, if they tithe to their church, I don't know what those expenses are. And I want to make sure that they are including those. So when I qualify somebody for a payment of $2,400 a month, and they say, I want them to tell me if that's really realistic for them, or if we need to lower that a little bit and look for a house that's maybe a little less expensive, so that they can actually afford all of the other things that I'm not counting. So, like you said, that conversation is really important, because we get more information about what it is that they can really do and what they are expecting from the process as well. So, like you said, we'll go over their liabilities. Do they have student loans? If they do, how much are they paying for those? Because we may calculate those a little differently than they are. And there's a lot of things that when they put in the application, they're putting them in one way, but we look at them a little different. We may be looking at their income a little differently because of the way we calculate variable income, like bonuses or overtime. We're going to look at their student loans maybe differently than they are. So those are things that we want to have that good conversation about. So this client that I'm working with, for instance, they had been working with another lender, and they didn't have a realtor involved. It was a personal transaction. They knew the seller. And so they started working with this other lender, who's also a big lender, but they're working directly with a call center. And that call center person doesn't have a vested interest. They talk to tons of people a day. And they got through the process, and she kept telling me, like, nobody told me this and nobody told me that. I was like, well, you don't have a realtor involved who might help you, but also you're not dealing with anybody who has a real vested interest in getting you to the finish line. I'm trying to build a client for life. I'm trying to build a relationship with these people, because in 5 years, when they're ready to refinance, in 10 years, when they want to buy their next house, I want them to come back to me. That person at the lender who works in a call center doesn't care about that. That's not a goal of theirs. So in this case, we had a long conversation about what they were going through, what they had been told, and what they should be expecting in the future. And some of those things were like, here's your budget. Is this what you can afford? I want you to sit down and think about what you've spent money on recently, and make sure that this is something that you can afford to do. This particular transaction happens to be an FHA 203K, which is a renovation loan. So we, had to be able to fit in a lot more than they were originally planning to spend on it, because it needed work. That was one of the things that they were not told by the previous lender, is like, hey, if the house is not in good condition, you can't finance it the way you would on a regular FHA loan. We're going to have to add in some renovation costs to this. And so that's how I ended up talking to them. So in their case, they had a lot of misinformation She had done a lot of research, but there's a lot of information that you don't get when you do your own research that we get through experience, just having gone through the process. So I was able to explain all of that. And we're, most of the way through getting all of the contractor bids in and stuff like that. But in this case, the big thing was listening to what they needed and what they were looking for and what was important to them. And you don't get that if you're doing just an online transaction with a couple of phone calls thrown in occasionally.
Hmm. And one of the things I think you said that in our previous conversation, you said you were in a buyer's market, which means
Mm-hmm.
the buyers have more control and maybe can bid below the asking price or hold strong on certain features. But
Right.
whether you're in a buyer's market or a seller's market, one of the things I try to tell my clients is to develop a vocabulary of real estate. And I don't mean a vocabulary of terms, but if you've seen three or four or five homes, you can develop in your head a perception of what that home is worth to you. And
True.
so you might see, three homes, they're all in very similar situations, similar developments, but one may have better access to commutation, better either highway access or whatever.
Right.
There's a value there. Another home might have better access to just recreation. If you have somebody who likes walking, one might be, and then you say, look, these three homes might be exactly the same, but which one is worth more to you? And then that's where you start adding value to the bid because now you say, okay, well, you have this home that really checks more boxes. It has the right number of bedrooms. You walk out your front door and make a right turn, and boy, you can be off for your morning run. You don't have to worry about it. Or, the highway is exactly 3 minutes from your front door, so you don't have it in whizzing past your house, but boy, it makes it commuting so much easier. And when you understand that, and then you tailor the approval to the situation. So I love doing that because let's say we'll get a client and they'll be approved for a $500,000 loan. But we might say for offer number one, we might give them approval at 450 because they'll take that and maybe they're playing hardball with the seller. Or another one, we might give them an approval at 550 because they want to show the seller that they're very well qualified and they're not just um, crawling in under the wire, but they're
Right.
very well qualified. And they use that as part of the strategy of making an offer because I'm more than just getting you approved for the loan, but I'm helping you figure out what the home ownership is going to be about and what your needs are and how does that fit in with what you're looking for. And that's a lot of fun. That's where you transcend the bean counter, just picking the boxes and making sure I have the right paperwork. And now we're talking about human relationships and what's important to you. And you've said that also, but it's just so much fun.
No, and I agree. Definitely, one of the reasons that I like people to start looking at things, 3 or 6 months ahead of time is I want them to talk to their realtor and start getting some listings. I don't want them to fall in love with anything. I don't want them to go look at houses. I want them to get an idea of what things are important to them. Is it important to them to have a one-story house versus a two-story house? Is it important to be in an area, like you said, that's close to the highway, but not too close? Those are things that they need to determine what are their priorities on a home, like you said, and determine, okay, these are the things I really want to concentrate on when I start looking at houses in earnest. I want to make sure that I do have a one story versus a two-story and I'm close to the highway. And that helps them to not waste so much time looking at houses that don't meet their needs. But in our market, we tend to write our pre-qualification letters. And in Texas, they're pre-qualification letters. We're not allowed to do pre-approval letters up front unless it's gone to the underwriter. So our pre-qualification letters tend to match the offer. So if someone's making an offer for 350,000 for a house, then we want to make sure that the letter also matches 350,000. So we don't necessarily show their cards that they qualify for more. But if that person says, "Hey, this is it. This is the house I want. I want to make a full price offer. I'm not going to ask for anything because I really want this house," then what else can I do to help you? And a lot of times I'll pick up the phone and call the seller's agent and just let them know, like, hey, I just want to let you know this, I've been working with this buyer. They are really well qualified. I've seen everything. This is the house that they want. What can we do to make sure that this happens? And just that little extra touch can sometimes push it over, especially in a buyer's market, that's a little easier. But in a seller's market as well, just letting them know, hey, this is really important to them. This is the house they're going to live in and raise their kids in. And sometimes that makes a difference to the seller to know that they are really that we're all on their team, that we're really trying to make this work for them.
Yeah, I talk about the A team sometimes, and I talk about helping my clients by helping them come up with the team up front. So,
Right.
who's the realtor that you want to work with if you're buying in this market? Who's the home inspector? Let's talk to an insurance broker up front so there's no surprises. And sometimes what happens is we can assemble a team of just all stars, right? People who are great realtors and whose word is their bond and who can be trusted and who have good judgment. And we can put them in touch with an insurance broker, say know what it's going to cost. And we can have a home inspector on standby. So if they
Right.
find a home, boom, they don't have to start looking around. And there's a tremendous value to the to our Rolodexes, yours and mine, because we know
Yeah.
so many people. We know the people that we use ourselves or we trust. And that makes all the difference. So if you're a first-time home buyer in San Antonio, Texas, I can't think of anyone better suited to help you on your mortgage financing than Candy Williams. And boy, this has been a lot of fun. It's so much fun, the fact that um we're so much, our practices are different and our clients are probably different in terms of, the price points and stuff like that. But it's great to connect with you on a values basis because I think that's where we're siblings from a separate mother.
I agree. I think we have very similar values and how we operate our business and how we want to take care of our clients. And I appreciate so much you having me on because this has really been fun.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.